What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am your humble host, dendrologist specializing in the conservation of a very, very endangered Robert Woods, getting more endangered by the week, an astronaut aboard the Pitts 8 Moon Expedition, Pete Rogers. And I am joined by just one fellow nerd this week. We have Duck Father and runner-up on the Great Russell Wilson Cooking Show, resident old man Clark Barnes. Clark, how you doing today?
Doing great, Pete. How about yourself?
I'm good. How was your week of your wheel punishment, in which your parent/significant other set your lineup or picked a player to put in your lineup?
So I chickened out and I did pick one player.
Okay.
In a super flex, and so I did it very deceptively.
Excellent.
And Katie picked Sam Darnold over Teddy Bridgewater. So like a difference of like a half of a point.
That's not bad.
They both had good games.
They both had good games.
Worked out okay.
So, oh well. So then ultimately the punishment really was, did Sam Darnold do better than Teddy Bridgewater?
Like just barely. Oh. They both had like
so it wasn't even
unreasonably good games.
It was a gift.
Yeah.
The wheel both can hand out punishment. It can also hand out gifts. And in your case, Clark, I also let it be known, Nick, who says he's quote unquote on an airplane right now, thinks it's just an excuse to try to, delay his punishment of having to eat a spoonful of mustard, thinking we'll forget about it. We certainly won't, Nick. It is coming for you. I can't enforce it because we're all remote, but maybe Clark can drive up and bang on the door and force feed it down your throat.
Well, Pete, I've got a confession for you. I do not like applying force or threats of physical violence to get people to do what I want, even if I think it's a good idea. So I'm a little bit of an anomaly here lately.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well then you're a terrible option for this, and I'll have to break NerdBall's budget in order for me to fly out to be the one.
That's fine.
Put the force.
It was a great weekend though. Tons of amazing football,
all kinds of good stuff. And in order to best break that down and bring it to you guys, dear listeners, we've kind of spiced up the Monday pods, which I'm a big fan of. We're obviously going to talk about the news, and there's lots to get to. We had some breaking news actually just before we even started recording or really updating on news. But we're going to start instead to give you guys a nice recap of the week that just occurred. We're going to start with some props and flops. And so some guys who we're going to give props to, who we want to make sure we recognize them for their strong performances. And then also some guys maybe who let us down and just didn't quite live up to the billing that we were anticipating from them. Clark, why don't you start us off? Give us a prop for your prop. Who are you giving props to for week 2?
Okay, true to form, I didn't understand the rules. These are people who I thought, my prop is someone who I thought there was a lot of people on the fence at the beginning of the season.
Perfect.
And I hate to claim victory after 2 weeks because it's a super
You're giving
long
yourself
season.
Props for these calls that you made.
Yes.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
Sam Darnold and the Carolina Panthers look good. Now, granted, I love to call out when someone has a good performance against a team that we really, really expect to be bad at the beginning of the season. You want to temper expectations, right? So when the Texans beat the Jaguars, let's not start booking those playoff tickets just yet. Yes, the Texans look good. Also, it was the Jaguars. So when Sam Darnold came out and looked pretty good against the Jets, while that was good for me for fantasy and the things that I predicted to happen this season, not convinced. The jury's still out. Then Sam Darnold shows up to play against the other Jameis Winston guys, who still exists. By
Yikes! Boy, did he make a guest appearance.
Yeah, and so and still looked pretty good. Not a world beater, but looked good and looked a little bit more aggressive than Teddy Bridgewater.
Yes,
and with Christian McCaffrey in the back pocket, which Teddy didn't have, to be fair. Just very pleased with how this offense is breaking out. There's so many talented people. If you have DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson, like I do in a couple of leagues, there's going to be disappointing weeks because there's just not going to be 500 yards passing to go around. He's not Tom Brady. But just very excited for what the Panthers are doing so far with the Sam Darnold trade early.
Yeah, no, everything has kind of looked really nice for them. And you were saying, you said Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, you might get some bad weeks. I think it might be more Robbie Anderson or Terrace Marshall. You might have some bad weeks. DJ Moore looks like the locked in wide receiver one. This man is getting, 8+ targets a game and looks every bit of every bit of the wide receiver one that he showed flashes of in his past. And we wanted him to be. And I know if Nick were here, he'd talk about how that's because he's now getting bumped into that kind of predominant X role now. I think he's getting moved out of the slot. And Robbie, is that right? Or you're better.
They're all kind of moving around.
They're all kind of moving around.
I'm not the only.
He seems to be the more focal point of the passing game now than he was last year.
He does. Robbie Anderson, more traditional field stretching, big, tall guy, not pigeonholed into that. I think is just more and more common to like receivers are moving around the formation, right?
Yep.
It's not new, and I'm not the first person to bring this up, but who is an X versus a Y versus the Z and all of that is just doesn't apply to a ton of offenses. I think DJ Moore is like just an absolute specimen who also seems to be working very hard at getting better and has just not had the best QB luck, right? And Teddy Bridgewater is super conservative.
Yes. And the switch has definitely been made where it's like Teddy Bridgewater, Robbie Anderson broke out because Teddy Bridgewater was like, oh, Robbie Anderson is my go-to guy. And DJ Moore was just kind of the second in in that passing tree. And now with Sam Darnold, DJ Moore is the number one, at least through 2 weeks, has been the number one guy in that passing tree. And Robbie Anderson, you're looking, he's the field stretcher. And we saw it against the Texans in week 1, right? No, Jets in week 1, where Robbie Anderson got the big, 40-yard touchdown, and that boosted his score. But then week 2, he doesn't get that. His fantasy production is not as high a level. DJ Moore, I think, has, of all of the receivers in Carolina, he is a locked in like wide receiver 2 floor, in my opinion, from what we've seen so far in his usage. And Robbie Anderson, I think Robbie Anderson managers don't panic. Like, don't worry about him at this point. What I would say is that he feels less of like the surefire wide receiver 2 week in, week out that he was last year with Teddy Bridgewater. And he might be a little more finicky, maybe give you some flex wide receiver 4 weeks, but certainly has the wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 1 ceiling that we saw last year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're both going to finish pretty close to one another. Just in the end, they're both very talented.
Yeah.
Darnold's not pulling the Zach Wilson where he only has eyes for Corey Davis. But if I had to predict like each week who will finish with the higher point total, I would just pick DJ Moore every week. And I feel like I'd win, 9 out of 17 games.
I think that didn't feel true last year. And I think that is definitely true this year.
Yeah.
Also, you said this way back when we were doing our offseason shows, but like a testament to Christian McCaffrey that the man doesn't play most of last year is unquestionably the RB1 this year in redraft and is more or less lived up to the billing.
Totally has paid it off.
He's incredible. The guy is so good.
They said this on the broadcast like 6 times. And as someone who just like lucked into a 101, Christian McCaffrey got tackled on the 1 like 3 times. It's like flashbacks to like Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones's years where they got tackled at the 1 so many times. And still with all of that, and with Derrick Henry just deciding that he wanted
just becomes a god. Just puts the whole team on his back. Greg Jennings.
McCaffrey still the RB2 in a lot of formats with almost no touchdown production.
It's
just
incredible.
really, really amazing.
He's his role in that offense is just unquestioned, like it's unparalleled anywhere else in the NFL. It is truly amazing. I want to give props this week to Marquis Brown, who against the Chiefs on 10 targets, 6 catches, 113 yards and a touchdown. And he's just been a guy similarly to, I feel like DJ Moore, but in a much more extreme, whereas like last year, he had such high expectations coming in for him. He was huge in that first week 1 game against the Dolphins. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, Marquis Brown, light this man up for the Ravens passing game. And then wasn't quite the same. But since week 11 of 2020, he's had at least 80 yards or a touchdown in every game he's played, which is like, I think 8 games in a row, which is really impressive. The second year bump seems to be here. And he just always, in watching that Chiefs game, he just always seemed to be open for Lamar. And I think he's cemented himself. He's, first of all, looked really good. And I think he cemented himself as a guy who I felt initially that Rashad Bateman's return was going to supplant Marquise Brown. I think Rashad Bateman's return is going to completely like annihilate Sammy Watkins whenever Rashad Bateman does make it back to the field. Like Sammy Watkins will lose all value. I think Marquise Brown has played well enough and consistent enough that he is going to have a role for this offense moving forward. I thought it was going to be a one or the other, and I think it could be a both once the Ravens eventually get all healthy at their receiver position. But he is a guy like he's an unquestioned wide receiver 2 for me from here on out in my wide receiver rankings, just given how he started this year.
Yeah, he's because of the offense that he plays in, and because Sammy Watkins, I think, is playing well, he is a wide receiver 2. You're just going to have to be okay with getting 2 catches for 50 yards every once in a while. He looked really good against the Chiefs. The Chiefs defense, despite getting 2 interceptions against the Ravens, is not the greatest. They don't have to be the greatest. They just need to cause a couple of turnovers, and their offense can usually do the rest. But, Chiefs poised to win that game were not for the fumble of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I know that you want to talk about him. And so I would like to lead off, if that's okay, as an absolute Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the greatest thing since cheesy jalapeno bread backer.
It is. That is your hill to die on. And so do you want to do it now, or should we save it for later?
It's your show, or you're the host.
All right, we'll save it for later. We'll definitely talk on it.
Okay.
We'll definitely talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Don't worry, people.
Stay tuned.
Plus, it's exactly good tease. So if you're a Clyde Edwards-Helaire manager, you gotta keep listening. I think you're right. The thing that has given me the most confidence, first of all, I just want to give him props for a great Monday Night Football game. But the thing that's given me that feels different this year is the fact that in the Ravens passing game, which in the past has been so Mark Andrews focused, it feels like that's shifted. Marquise Brown is in Lamar's good graces, whereas like when they need to make plays, he looks Marquise Brown's way, or they draw plays for Marquise Brown.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. I think that's great to see. And we've seen the Ravens in 2 shootout games against the Raiders and the Chiefs. And that's one of the reasons Brown has been so heavily involved and prevalent. But that alone makes me really excited if I were a Marquise Brown manager.
Yeah. And I don't have, charts to back this up, but through 2 games, it looks like Marquise Brown's not just running posts and 9 routes anymore. They're running crossers and drags, which is what the Bills did for Josh Allen last year. And they signed Stephon Diggs. Let's not take that away from them. But those throws,
a decent wide receiver for him.
Those throws seem to be easier for young players to make. Like those are a lot of the throws that you're seeing the Patriots scheme up for Mac Brown. Like there's 2 guys running across the field. Yeah. And so he has all day to look at them and then decide if that's who he wants to throw the ball to. And we saw that a lot last night with Marquise Brown, who Brandon Cooks is small and kind of plays small. Like he gets lit up and still plays, but he kind of plays small, and so does Marquise Brown. And that's okay. Like he ran out of bounds a lot. And that's cool. Like after you pick up 26 yards, don't get lit up.
I mean, he's 5'9" and 180. Like,
yeah, like that's
all right with that.
But he does that, right? Yeah. And so that is just a part of his personality. But he was also getting open deep. Lamar just with some really bad throws last night and some good ones, like some amazing plays and some just like
he missed. There was one right at the beginning of the game that he missed. And then luckily it didn't come back to bite them. But I know we are a Lamar Stan podcast and we've been it forever, but like, good Lord, that man is unbelievable to watch. Like he is just on the open field when they just have QB dives for him, and they were talking about this on the broadcast where it's like every step he takes is a move. It's not that he's running, it's somehow he's juking every single step and then gains 15 yards, and you're like, how is this happening? You just ran through the entirety of the defense and it was a successful play. It's ridiculous.
There's only a couple of guys who can do that, and you see this with young running backs all the time. Is that they were able to turn on the quicks and make these subtle little movements in college and outplay the people that they were playing against. And someone who does that just absolutely the best is Alvin Kamara. He looks like he's not trying and he just floats past everybody. And Lamar Jackson does that at quarterback, like not quite as well, but he does it at quarterback better than I don't know, almost every running back in the league, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it's insane. He is a truly incredible player to watch. And I can't imagine how sad and desperate my life must be if I were to spend my time hating him like some people.
Like, what an awesome, like, we have an opportunity for Chiefs Ravens to be good for 5-6 years. And it's just so awesome when things like that turn out.
Yes.
What a game.
What a game. Oh my God, it was so good. Yeah. I, as a Patriots fan, yes, I mean, the Tom Brady Peyton Manning rivalry always will have a special place in my heart, but sign me up for 10 years of Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson over stiff Tom Brady and stiff Peyton Manning standing in the pocket, making great calls at the line that, result in a 10-yard slant or whatever.
Either one. I mean,
not quite the same.
This is the new one, but I don't want to take away from what we had.
Oh, I do. I want to take away from it.
That's good.
They're average. They're fine. They're okay. All right, let's skew a little negative now, Clark, and give me a flop for this week.
So
again, it's you think you flopped on this person.
Oh, this is someone I'm panicked.
Oh no, you're flopped. Okay,
I think I flopped.
Okay, we're panicked everywhere.
I live up in the Pacific Northwest, and I like the Seahawks, but I'm not like a Seahawks homer or anything. I watch the game, and I'm really starting to worry about AJ Brown. Not that he's not good, but this Titans offense, I mean, they looked horrible.
Yeah.
Until Derrick Henry just decided to be the adult in the room and just carry
and they still looked horrible. Like, that's the thing, is like Derrick Henry was just like, I'm going to go for 200 plus all-purpose yards.
I'm just wondering if it got uncomfortable for the Seahawks training staff to try to cover up Pete Carroll's excitedness in those little windbreaker pants, watching Derrick Henry bring his team back from behind by running the football.
This is a Pete Carroll wet dream. He was just on the sidelines, just panting, heavy breathing was the subtitle under any time they cut to Pete Carroll. Because this is his fever dream.
Yeah, AJ Brown dropped a lot of passes yesterday, and first game bailed you out with a touchdown. I think it was like 20 some odd yards and a touchdown. And in this game, like, he and Julio Jones both look like Ryan Tannehill's passes don't agree with them.
Yeah,
and the Titans didn't look great week one, and despite winning, they did not look great in week two either. And I'm starting to panic a little bit.
Julio Jones also got robbed because he had a touchdown in the back of the end zone that they just didn't give him. So that was a number that doesn't show up in your fantasy.
Like, they both look good, and I don't think AJ Brown's not good anymore.
No, he had one really bad drop where he was just like wide open and it boinked off his hands. I think there's reason to be a little worried. I would give it a little bit more time. He played by far the most snaps out of the offense and still led the team in targets. And so I think there is still hope. But I think it's the question you ask yourself is like, you drafted AJ Brown likely to be your wide receiver one, right? How long can you wait for him not to produce like that? Like, what kind of runway can you give him for your team to still be viable for a playoffs, if he eventually turns it on? Like, if it's something where you're running that options quickly, you might have to sell him even at this kind of discounted price to try to get something back, some sort of player back who can kind of, maybe make up for his production. But yeah, it hasn't been a great start for DK Metcalf either. Metcalf had, a good week one and then kind of disappeared in week two. But again, like AJ Brown, AJ Brown saw like 8 targets. DK saw 11 against the Titans. So still, like, the work is there, it just didn't click this week.
Yeah. And with, as far as getting out, these are the best / worst, but the best players to have. Cause like, I'm not going to trade AJ Brown, and I'm going to play him every week. He will probably statistically turn it around. We forget that it's a long season and that everybody has kind of doldrum-ish games. You just play him and just hope that it turns around. And if he plays 16 games and finishes as the wide receiver 30, well, whatever. He started for you every week. DK Metcalf, I think, kind of same deal. God, I loved there was one play in the Seahawks game where Metcalf caught a little pass and the corner just had him squared up, and the sideline was right there. And DK Metcalf put his head down and just ran him over, and it was so awesome because he's so huge. And with Metcalf, why I consider AJ Brown a little bit different is like I'm not worried about the Seahawks offense.
Yeah,
they're moving the ball just fine, and Tyler Lockett is just absolutely insane. On fire.
Oh my god,
yeah. So I'm confident it'll come around for DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
AJ Brown is more like, I guess Arthur Smith was the key to unlocking this offense ? Because they're struggling.
No, for sure. That's definitely where the panic lies. It's like if Arthur Smith was the one who like turned Ryan Tannehill into a top 6 quarterback, and now that he's gone and Ryan Tannehill regressed down to like a top 15 QB, that's a huge hit for AJ Brown and for Julio Jones. Yeah, there's a difference when you're talking about Marquis Brown, 5'9", 180, going just stepping out of bounds, as opposed to, all 6'4", 230 DK Metcalf ducking your head down and run through people.
And just like, I felt so bad for the corner or safety or whatever, because
he's like, coaches told me, like, this is how you tackle, and yet it's going to end badly for you.
It was an Oklahoma drill live on TV, and it was totally unfair.
Do you think Pete Carroll would trade Russell Wilson for Derrick Henry?
Yes,
100%.
He'd probably pay also. He'll be like, we'll pick up 60%.
We'll give you, Wilson's... and we'll send a first round pick. We'll send a first round pick and Russell Wilson for Derrick Henry. Please, God, give us Derrick Henry. My flop for this week is, it's kind of the whole game was a flop. I mean, 2017 score. Come on, Dallas and Chargers. It was a good game, but I wanted high score and I needed it in the 30s. But Amari Cooper, after 16 targets, 13 catches, 139 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Buccaneers, he gets 5 targets, 3 catches, and 24 yards against the Chargers. And this personally hit home because I needed Amari Cooper to have me a big game. And now I'm relying on DeAndre Swift in Monday Night Football to get me 25 points, which could he do it? He could. Will he do it? Maybe not. But going from the double digit, almost 20 targets against the Bucs in a game that was, a shootout, go toe to toe, to 5 targets. And it wasn't like CeeDee Lamb had 9 targets. He caught 8 of 9 for 81 yards. So like, I don't love that. I thought that after week 1, it was like, okay, Amari Cooper, wide receiver 1, lock it in. We love this. And now I'm not sure it's true and I don't love it.
Yeah, the announcers pointed this out, and that's why I like when Tony Romo calls a game, because he actually says something worth listening to. That they're playing hard. Chargers play a lot of 2 deep safety looks, and that's why Tony Pollard got so much work. That's why Ezekiel Elliott got so much work. That's why CeeDee Lamb got so many short passes, because the good stuff was the underneath stuff, on top of it being not an incredibly like high scoring game, which I totally expected. I stacked Dak and Cooper, and I was
everyone stacked everything in this game. I mean, I will say Mike Williams more or less lived up to what I was saying he would do, but still, but yeah.
Well, speaking of giving ourselves props, both of my top props hit again this week, with Justin Herbert going over 300 yards and Zeke rushing and receiving more than like 80 some odd. So nailed that one.
Clark Barnes, again. If you, dear listeners, are in the prop game and you want to play player props, which I saw someone on Twitter tweet this out, and I was like, this is a really good take. If you're in fantasy football, if you like play fantasy football at a really high level and you do all your own research and all this shit, do player props as well. You're basically doing the same shit. Like, and you could make also, it's another way to make money. Anyways,
it's fun.
Go read Clark's player props. He does 2 per week. And let me tell you, the man batting 1,000 here.
4-0. So this is probably the high water mark, but still.
So this is it. This is a Mike Evans. You're going to peak, and then you're going to have 3 bad weeks, and then you'll have another rocket up the roller coaster ride.
Yeah, and I think Cooper is going to be sort of a victim, like we've talked about with some of these other good receiving duos. He's just on a really good team, so there's just going to be weeks where you suck it up and you don't get a ton of points, but it's worth the high. Like on last week's show with Jordan, the preview show that y'all do on Wednesdays, which is freaking awesome. You said, hey, I'm going to sit Mike Evans this week. And I'm like, there you go.
There it is.
Mike Evans, huge game incoming. And the Buccaneers are going to be the same way. Like Antonio Brown disappeared this week, but that's okay, because Tom Brady's going to throw 60 touchdowns this year. And so you just keep playing.
Yeah. It pains me to see Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski playing like they're in their mid-20s right now.
They're killing it.
I don't understand it. It breaks my brain.
As a total like throwaway keeper on my FFPC dynasty team, where you only have 16 roster spots, so it's a super shallow dynasty format. I was like, I'll keep Gronk even though I have Kelsey, and so I put in Gronk this week, just like, I'm gonna totally regret this, aren't I? And then like 1 minute into the game, it's like, never mind, my flex is good.
Gronk touchdown. God, man, it would be utterly insane if Gronk finishes with like 10 plus touchdowns this year.
He only needs like 5.
I know, he's already got 4. He just needs 6 more. It's also crazy to think about, like, Gronk feels like he's been in this league forever. He's as old as Travis Kelce. Gronk doesn't make sense. Both he and Tom Brady don't make sense to me. All right, well, there you go. There's some props and flops, little week 2 talk. Before we get into the news, though, I wanted to let you know about our Patreon. Patreon.com/NerdBallFF. We have all kinds of perks for those who wish to join, including joining our staff Discord channel to talk football throughout the season, our starts and sit hotline, where you can submit your most pressing starts and sit question, and we will get back to you immediately with our thoughts. And you can also submit questions to be answered live on this show. So if you want to support us, and we appreciate anything you're willing to offer, please go to patreon.com/NerdBallFF. All right. Let's cue up the music. Let's get into the news. And as it usually does, the news is headlined by many, many injuries, because good Lord, did week 2 have a bunch of them. Most notably, Jarvis Landry is now week to week with an MCL sprain. He left the Browns game early with that. And it ultimately, I thought it was going to lead to Donovan Peoples-Jones or Anthony Schwartz, kind of seeing some work from Baker. Nope, it was all the tight ends. Austin Hooper saw, I think, 5 targets. Their other tight end, Harrison. Anyways,
Njoku's getting in there.
Njoku's got 4 targets. Yep. Like it was all through they operated their 3 tight ends. I don't have a lot of confidence that this opens the door for Donovan Peoples-Jones or Anthony Schwartz to really make a big step. It maybe pushes Odell back into onto the field earlier than expected, but it's a bummer because I was ready for Landry to kind of have a really big game in last week, and that didn't happen because he got injured. So the Browns offense, this Browns passing game clock, I don't really know who you should be rostering from it because it doesn't really seem to be all that potent.
I think Schwartz and Peoples-Jones are going to have an impact now that Odell and Jarvis Landry are out, and in a game that they're going to need it. The Browns and Texans game, I think the spread was 12.5. And I said, that's ridiculous. 12. I mean, like, again, I know the Texans aren't
professional
good.
Sports teams. Like,
right.
They're
I
all
know
pros.
The Texans aren't good, but they have at least an okay quarterback.
Right.
More on that later. But 12.5 was stupid. I think they ended up losing by 10, and it was a little closer than that. And they played with Davis Mills for half the game. Point being, the Browns really did control this one all the way with the running game. So that Peoples-Jones and Schwartz didn't have big games in this one isn't super surprising to me. But those guys are good, right? Yeah. Like Schwartz out of nowhere, week 1. And then Peoples-Jones, several games last year showed us that he was good. And they are going to have to play, right? There's no other options.
Right.
And while the Browns want to run the ball 40 times a game, that play action pass game off of the run is just killer. So I expect that if you're desperate for a wide receiver, do take a shot on one of those guys on your waiver wire. They're probably going to be relatively inexpensive. Schwartz is probably already gone. Peoples-Jones is probably available, and you can do a lot worse. Peoples-Jones, go back and look at the end of last year. He was killing it on those deep play action balls.
Yeah, he really was. And maybe with like, week 1, it seemed like Odell was questionable to play up until the game. And then week 2, Jarvis Landry was like, it could be that if going into week 3 with a whole week to prepare with Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz as the wide receivers 1 and 2, that the offense goes a little bit more through them rather than kind of like, oh shit, on the fly, we have to adjust because we lost our number 1 receiver 2 weeks in a row. I will say my preseason trade of Nyheim Hines for Donovan Peoples-Jones in my dynasty league doesn't look great at the moment.
Yeah.
But hopefully, fingers crossed, Donovan Peoples-Jones shows what because he did. He looked really good last year, and everything kind of coming out of camp was like, Donovan Peoples-Jones is here, baby. He's making plays. So maybe this will be the chance. Maybe week 3 against the Raiders, right? Is that who the Browns play? I think that's who the Browns play. That'll be a game because the Raiders 2-0.
Yeah, apparently you're going to need to score.
Apparently the Raiders are good, so that's something to take note of. Moving on to the news, more wide receiver injury news. Leviska Shenault and Deontay Johnson both left their games with an injury, but neither of them seemed to be serious. Johnson had what looked like a really bad injury at the end of a terrific game in which he had 9 catches on 12 targets for 105 yards, but it doesn't seem like there's any long-term damage. His week 3 status is currently up in the air. And then Shenault suffered a shoulder injury after a game in which he was targeted 7 times, got 2 of them for -3 yards. Yikes, Clark. Has the Leviska shine worn off?
It depends on how you're looking at it. If you thought
Panic
Leviska Shenault was an absolute baller, that has been confirmed. If you knew, pointing at me for all you listeners, that the Jaguars were still going to be terrible this year, then yeah, I mean, they're really bad. But Shenault, if he plays and you need a wide receiver, he's really, really super talented. It's just that the team sucks and there's not going to be a lot of offense to go around, unfortunately.
Yeah, this Jaguars offense. I mean, Marvin Jones had a good game this last week. He had 11 targets and a touchdown. And so that, looking as their wide receiver 1 there. But this offense is definitely not at all what I'll take full blame here. What I was anticipating for them, given the weapons that they had, given the Trevor Lawrence hype. And maybe I was blindly looking past Urban Meyer being maybe not a good coach.
Well, it's Lawrence has made some really, really good throws and doesn't look lost out there, which, I mean, for a rookie QB on a bad team, like, you've passed. You've already had a good rookie season. But they're just, at all the positions that we don't talk about in fantasy, they are very poor. And it's really hard to win that way.
That's true. When you don't have an offensive line that can block, makes it really difficult to throw the football. I mean,
and they start giving it to Robinson, in the second half, and he looks great, and then they stop. Like, what? Yeah.
It's not great out in Jacksonville. All right, let's rattle through some quarterback injuries that went down. God, another just laundry day of injuries. Laundry? What was that? Tua Tagovailoa day to day with a rib injury. He left the game in the middle of the first, was replaced by Jacoby Brissette, who couldn't put together any points against the Bills for the Dolphins. Not great. Tyrod Taylor left Sunday.
Revenge game for the Bills. Are we gonna? Okay.
I was gonna blow through them and then we could talk. Perfect. Tyrod Taylor left Sunday with a hamstring injury, and this was the breaking news. He was just placed on IR per John McClain on the Houston Chronicle. So he's out at least 4 weeks, which sucks because he was playing really well. And you can go check out Patty's QPI index for that. He was one of their top rated quarterbacks. Carson Wentz is dealing with 2 sprained ankles. Somehow sprained both of them. Too early to tell if he'll be out for week 3, but he didn't look great against the Rams, though he finally got Michael Pittman involved, which we all love to see. And then finally, Andy Dalton has a bone bruise on his knee, which actually is probably best case scenario because it was a non-contact knee injury, which is more or less always an ACL tear. So luckily that it's just that. However, what isn't great news is Matt Nagy's insistence on keeping Andy Dalton the starter and Fields on the bench. He has already said that when Andy Dalton is healthy, he will start for the Bears. Fields came in and threw 6 completions in pace of Dalton for 60 yards and threw a pick, but also had a beautiful touchdown drop by Robinson. So Clark, between all of these quarterbacks, which one missing time would have the bigger fantasy impact for you?
I think Tua missing time has the biggest because he's maybe someone you're starting, and there's a lot of interesting characters in that starting cast that you would much rather see Tua throwing to than Jacoby Brissette. The positive would be Justin Fields coming in for Andy Dalton. A lot of people drafted him waiting for Fields to take over as a starter, and we're going to get that chance. Fields didn't look amazing coming in, but I mean, that is like the worst case scenario. And he is a rookie. I just talked about, if you've watched Trevor Lawrence play, my expectations for rookies aren't super high. So, hopefully we'll get something a little better out of Fields next week. It'll at least be interesting to see him. Because I mean, like, I love that Justin Fields said, like, hey guys, let's remember Andy Dalton's a person. You don't have to be a dick about it. That's not what he said. This is paraphrasing. And I feel that very much.
Yeah.
But as a fan, I'm much more excited to see Justin Fields out there than I am to see, Andy Dalton. Yeah.
Though Andy Dalton, I will say, I mean, Nick needs to get on his beard game because Andy Dalton's ginger beard on point. Andy Dalton has always had good hair, and now he's really embraced the ginger beard, and it's a good look for him. It's a good look.
But Allen Robinson got involved finally. Thank God.
Darnell Mooney was looking good. He had 8 targets. I love to see that. Yeah, I totally agree with you about Tua, though, because Tua missing time, like this Dolphins offense looked bad with Jacoby Brissette under center. And you're right that there's, Devontae Parker, Jalen Waddle, and drumroll, please, because wrapping up the news, Clark Barnes, guess who's back? It's your boy, Will Fuller. After missing week 2 with a personal reason, went to get his mind right. Good for you, Will. I hope you're feeling better. But now he's ready to go. The Dolphins are playing the Raiders. The Browns aren't. But he's going up against the Raiders in week 3. And man, I would love to have him have Tua under center with him. Jacoby Brissette, still a capable quarterback, can still throw the football. How high do you rank Fuller as in his first week of NFL action this year?
I mean, with Brissette, I don't know. I mean, 20s, right? A flex that you're willing to take a shot on because you've lost Jerry Jeudy, or you've lost another good wide receiver that you were kind of counting on. Mm-hmm. I drafted Will Fuller everywhere, expecting him to miss a game, and then he missed 2. When it was announced, it's like Will Fuller is missing a game for a personal reason. I immediately thought of like all of the things that are so much more important than football, and it was a super long list. So hopefully he's doing better. Am super excited to see him on this Dolphins offense. Segue to, man, Jalen Waddle has also looked very, very good. Sometimes it takes guys a while to acclimate to the pro game. Man, Waddle's running around there with his hair on fire, just like doing tons of work out of the wide receiver role.
Yeah, and this is the thing that's like, this is why why Tua being out right now is it's just terrible timing, because God, Will Fuller, the speed of Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle together in the same offense is tantalizing.
And then Devontae Parker out there as like the third guy. I mean, yes. that's gonna be tough to defend.
That's a great wide receiver trio. And you hate for Tua, who, last year was dealing with his, like, obviously came into the league dealing with injuries and is now getting injured again. Like, you just hate that this is how this season is going for him, especially given the fact that seemingly Dolphins brass is like on that Deshaun Watson train, which, all right, Dolphins, let's work with what you got and not what you don't have. But hopefully Tua is healthy. Hopefully he can play in week 3. And if not, with Jacoby Brissette, it definitely knocks down my excitement for Will Fuller, who's a guy who basically, when he's on the field, is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy and is like kind of proven that time after time. So definitely excited for his return. I also drafted him in a bunch of leagues and just sat out that 1 week and now get to reap the benefits, which is nice.
Yeah, if you didn't get to see the Dolphins play in week 1, the Bills were upset and they showed it. So the Dolphins are a little bit better than what we saw last week.
Yeah.
And the Bills just
the Bills defense also might be really good this year.
I think they're going to be good. And I think they showed that against the Steelers.
Yeah,
who
that's what I mean.
I want to talk about for a second. So I'm going to steer it that way.
Perfect.
I am worried about the Steelers offense. A lot of people nailed this. Ben Roethlisberger getting older. The offensive line is not looking really great. Najee Harris finally did something Najee Harris did something this week, got us a touchdown, looked good as a receiver out of the backfield, looked like a man, just pushing still the secondary over. So that's awesome. But it is approaching panic button time in Pittsburgh. They have looked terrible.
Yeah,
for the first 2 games.
It's, first of all, it's the inefficient Najee Harris that everyone knew you were getting, where it's just like, I had thought
some of us believed, Pete. I'm right here.
You certainly,
but yes, you were right.
Yes. I just thought, so I wrote about this in last week's Roast and Ghost column where I was like, all right, Najee Harris, yes, week 1 was bad, but that was going up against a Buffalo Bills defense that I think is really good. And this week I was like, all right, they're going up against the Raiders. The Raiders just got absolutely torched on the ground by the Ravens. Like, this is a moment where you drafted Najee Harris for, and even as bad as the Pittsburgh's offensive line has been through one week, you know, it won't impact because they're playing a bad defense. Well, I was wrong. Like, that is a terrible sign that against a bad matchup, Najee Harris still ran for like 40 yards on 15 carries. Like, that's terrible inefficiency. And then he was able to make it up in the passing game, which is one of the big benefits of Najee Harris, is that he's such a viable pass catcher and really good out of the backfield. But yeah, I think you have to accept, if you drafted Najee Harris, he's going to be a high-end RB2 week in, week out, and it's going to be ugly. It's going to be really gross. And the only reason he's doing that is because he's going to get, 25 touches a game. And then in the passing game, I've been saying this throughout the offseason. It's Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is the number 1 wide receiver in Pittsburgh. That is the receiver you should have gone and got. I don't think that this offense is going to ever have, unless Ben Roethlisberger, takes a bunch, does the Will Fuller and pops full of some PEDs in his arm and starts, sorry, I apologize. Starts slinging the rock a little bit more. Like, I don't think it's going to be able to support Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, and Chase Claypool. So if you invested heavily in this offense, like, that's definitely worrisome.
Yeah. And here's the hope for Steelers fans. I like to be an optimist.
You do.
The hope for Steelers fans is the Bills defense looks really good.
Yep.
Right. Even with Tua in there, they were stopping the Dolphins, who just playmakers all over the field. Not a top flight offense, but like very serviceable. Maybe the pass rush for the Raiders finally got that little extra bump that they needed, because they've been so close for a couple of years. Maybe they're putting it together, and this will just be, we'll look back and think, well, they had 2 tough matchups. That's why they looked bad. You nailed it with Deontay Johnson as the number 1 wide receiver. Tiny bit of fantasy talk here. Allow Juju Smith-Schuster's value to continue to plummet this year, and then jump on it because he's on a 1-year deal with Pittsburgh. And I just don't see how
there's no way
he stays there.
Yeah. Pittsburgh plays the Bengals next week.
If they cannot score against the Bengals,
that's
evacuate. It's time to pack up and
evacuate the building. All right, but last thing on the news, a new introduction. Clark did a beautiful transition into this, and that is we're going to bring out our patented worry panic scale index, where I have 2 players that we're going to talk about, and we grade them on a scale of 1 to 10 as to how worried we are about them. 1 being not a worry in the world. 5, it's on my radar, and my worry gland has been activated, starting to perspire a little bit. And then 10 is the asteroid is here, and all life as we know it is about to be erased on this glorious green marble Earth. Clark, you referenced him at the top of the show. We're going to get into him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Where are you on the worry panic scale index with Clyde Edwards-Helaire after 2 games?
Okay. So there has been a sea change in my mind. I feel like I thought Clyde Edwards-Helaire was awesome, and he was the unquestioned number 1 running back on the best offense in the NFL. And I think rather Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the unquestioned number 1 offense, or number 1 running back in the best offense in football. And he's just good. Like, he's not shaking people out of their boots. He's not demanding volume. He's doing okay, right? Like, he's not probably more efficient than Joe Mixon, even though he's not getting quite as much run and quite as many fantasy points, but he's just okay. So he's not trash. Patrick Mahomes doesn't really seem to look for those short dump off passes to the running backs like a lot of other Andy Reid quarterbacks have done in the past. And so I'm just tempering expectations now. I was over the moon. I ranked Edwards-Helaire as my number 4 running back, and then questioned, was that too low? And I think we're just seeing now that they just don't need him to be that good, and 2, he's just good.
Yeah. For the name of the game, I am like on a 7 to 8 on this scale. You're a 5. You're a 5. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You're on your radar and you're just
I'm worried. Yeah.
I'm a solid 8 right now. Because I, like you, drafted heavily in Clyde Edwards-Helaire and was like, this is the, number one running back on the number one offense. And oh my gosh, isn't it pretty? Because he has the backfield locked down. And this scary / sad thing is, the thing that worries me is he still has this backfield locked down.
Yep.
Like he's getting all of the work and it's just not coming to anything. He had 14 carries for 43 yards against the Browns and then 3 catches for 29 yards. And then last night against the Ravens, 13 carries for 46 yards. He got a touchdown sniped from Daryl Williams, who went in and scored.
Yeah.
And that's like, yes, that's always a risk, but like, the fact that the volume is there, the production is not. And like what you said, Clark, I also think that we need to, like, just in the way that we feel about or at least how I feel about the Bills backfield, where I'm just like, sure, if you want Devin Singletary or Zach Moss, I guess, but the Bills just aren't going to run the football. They're just going to throw the football. I think that's where I'm like, I need to address. That's how I got to feel about the Chiefs from now on. Like the Chiefs, they're just not going to run the football. Their ground game is just not going to be effective enough from a fantasy standpoint to like invest heavily in it. And it's killing me, Clark. I'm worried. I'm terrified.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can't remember if it was one of the tertiary receiving options. It was either Mecole Hardman or Byron Pringle. I can't remember, but he had a great quote, which like, you just don't hear players talk like this very much. He's like, who am I to take targets from Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill? And that got in my head watching Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick up 4 yards. And I'm like, yeah, why? Why would you do that? Why not
especially when you dump it off to Travis Kelce for a 5-yard gain and it somehow turns into a 35-yard touchdown.
I might be like a 6 actually on the worry.
I'm ramping you up. Come get on my level, Clark. Come get on my level because I am in a state of panic right now.
And this is I like to try to wrench lessons into my head because there's going to be football next year, probably. Well,
the asteroid is coming, Clark, so we could all be dead.
Yeah. Just make sure that I keep in mind evaluating the situation and the player, because he got sniped on a touchdown like you mentioned, but that wasn't like he wasn't in the goal line package. That just was he happened to be out.
He was off.
But God, the Bills line is what got me. They just don't need to. Crap, they're not going to.
I just and maybe like that's what I'm worried because I just think that the Chiefs just don't need to run the football because their MO is either play in a close shootout or get down by 20 points and then throw your way back into it. Like that's how the Chiefs win games.
I mean, they scored 33 and 35 points.
And Clyde Edwards-Helaire scored like 2 fantasy points in both of those. Not great. Another guy who we were high on in the offseason and who's a lesser fantasy name, but Giovanni Bernard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hasn't really done much for the Bucs, which is really upsetting. Now, this is a guy though who likely you didn't invest a lot of fantasy stock into, and so I can see where while the production isn't there, like for instance, for me, am I worried? I think I'm still below a 5 on Gio. I'm like a 4 maybe, and maybe this is blind confidence, but you didn't invest anything in him. He is probably you probably can dedicate a bench spot to him down the road. And I just think that the potential is there so much for him that if he does click with Brady in the next 4 weeks or so, that's just going to rocket him into fantasy relevance. And if that doesn't happen, great, fine. I held on to him for an extra 3 weeks. Then I drop him. No harm, no foul. So Giovanni Bernard, I'm not as panicked about, but how are you feeling on the worry panic scale index?
Oh, I am not worried at all because Beautiful. I missed. Okay. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
The prediction was wrong. They don't need it.
Yeah.
Tom Brady doesn't need a lot of pressure relief dump offs to this amazing receiving back. It's just not happening. So like if you're holding on to Gio, I'm going to make some waiver moves this weekend. And this weekend, like you said, I drafted him everywhere because he's free. Right. And I just saw James White in my head, and 100%. I was like, Leonard Fournette is not good, and Ronald Jones isn't good, and Gio's going to come in and take that role, and he hasn't, and so I'm out. Okay. We had a game where they needed it against the Cowboys, and they didn't do it at all. So
we had two. I mean, the Falcons was close for a hot second there. I think the thing is that we were learning is that the reason why James White was targeted so heavily by Tom Brady is because that was his best pass catcher. But when he's playing with Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and Chris Godwin, and somehow a 25-year-old Rob Gronkowski, he doesn't need to throw to his running backs. He just will throw it to the plethora of weapons he has down the field, plus playing behind a terrific offensive line. And
I think that this is an important move in fantasy. Like, don't get married to your preseason takes. Like, I think Gio has like my running back 16, and I meant it, and I've lots of good reasons for it.
Yep.
And
the narrative was there.
I'm off.
All right. Sounds good. Well, as I was ramping Clark up to higher on the worry scale with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Clark has dragged me. I agree with you. I'm not even on the scale. I'm off. Gio, we on the site and we on this podcast, after singing his praises this offseason, give you the permission to drop Giovanni Bernard in fantasy. And if he breaks out, then we will all fail, or we will all suffer.
Or you can pick him up,
or you can add him again.
But it's just clearly still Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones.
Yeah. All right. Before we go, speaking of picking him up, let's quickly talk some week 3 waiver wire. So if you had one player to add off waivers, Clark, who are you adding? And if it's not who I think you're going to say, I'm going to be very disappointed, because there's a clear one that is your man.
So it's Cordell Patterson.
Of course it is.
So before the season started, we're always trying to come up with things to write and talk about. And I saw, Cordell Patterson went to Atlanta, and we're all talking about how Mike Davis has no competition at the running back. Wouldn't it be fun if 6'4", 200 and some odd pounds Cordell Patterson finally turned into a running back for someone? And what did we see this week?
Cordell Patterson
killing it.
Is absolutely killing it. He is a vital part of this Falcons offense. He had 67 total yards in week 1, and then he caught 5 of 6 targets for 58 yards and a touchdown, and then had another 7 carries against the Bucs. Now those 7 carries went for 11 yards, but he's playing against the Bucs. He also scored on the ground again. Like, he is the best playmaker in the Falcons offense to start the season. Like, this is absurd. He's rostered in 16% of sleeper leagues. So yeah, you should 100% be going out and getting Cordell Patterson, because he has both. He also has position flexibility. You could be a wide receiver for you. He can be a running back for you. So I actually speaking of props, Clark, pat myself on the old back. I added Cordell Patterson last week. I benched him. I didn't start him. So I'm going to learn from that. But now I don't have to spend a whole bunch of fab to get him onto my team. But yeah, Cordell Patterson, what a beautiful story for you to go from like this kind of like well-founded joke take to actual coming to life.
It was my first Twitter thread.
It was
ever. There's memes. It's still up there.
It is. It's there. And when Cordell Patterson like finishes with 1,500 all-purpose yards this year, we are going to spam the shit out of that Twitter feed. That Twitter thread.
There'll be the "no one saw it" by somebody who's big, like Matt Berry, and he'll be right, and I'll be like, I sort of saw it.
Actually, I tweeted this out a while ago.
So. And look, like, I wouldn't, I don't think Cordell Patterson is going to start getting like 23 touches a game or something. Mike Davis is still going to play. Yeah. Patterson is like a risky flex play, but we saw he has a lot of upside, and he is making plays. No, not a lot of people on the Falcons are making plays.
He's making more plays than Calvin Ridley, and everyone drafted Calvin Ridley to be their wide receiver. Like Kyle Pitts, Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, if you want to go down that line, Matt Ryan, Mike Davis. He's outperforming all of them, and you can get him for free off waivers.
Your boy Pitts had an okay game, right? Like
my boy Pitts had a stupid behind his body catch and then accelerated 20 yards down the field, and we were all like, why are you not throwing the ball to this man all the time?
That's good. That's what you want to see. I know it's not like second round fantasy numbers that some people were hoping for, but like, this is good. Yeah. You saw some really good signs this week from Pitts.
Yep.
As expected, obviously, but we've seen it now.
Yeah. another feather to put in the cap of confidence with Kyle Pitts managers moving forward. Speaking of rookies who you should be going and making sure are on your fantasy team, my top waiver wire ad this week is Cordell Patterson, but it's also Rondell Moore, who last week, 5 targets against for the Cardinals against the Titans. You like to see that. He was on par with Christian Kirk, but Christian Kirk got all the hype because he scored 2 touchdowns. Well, this week, Rondell Moore caught 7 of 8 targets for 114 yards and a touchdown. And those 8 targets led the team. So you love to see it. Obviously, a lot of that came from he had a 77-yard touchdown in which Kyler Murray did some absolute magic behind the line of scrimmage and then found him wide open, tossed it to him, and Rondell Moore hit the Jets and got down there. But the thing that I love to see, and this is true with KJ Osborne for the Vikings as well, is when you have a player who makes that one big play that gets you a whole bunch of yards and a touchdown, I love seeing what is then the target share after that. Like how much are they then gone back to after that huge play? Rondell ending with 8 targets is huge. Like this guy is a vital part of this Cardinals offense that looks like one of the best offenses in the league with Kyler Murray playing at an MVP level. And on the flip side in this game, KJ Osborne, who also had a really good week 1, and then it starts off week 2 against the Cardinals with a 64-yard touchdown, still managed to finish with 6 targets, 5 catches, 91 yards in that score. And so like that is it's not only the huge smash play, it's then the quarterback going back to that person with regularity throughout the game that you love to see. So both of those guys, I'll say, Rondell Moore is over 50% rostered in Sleeper. So this is your chance to get him. If you don't get him now, you won't get him. KJ Osborne is a better deep league target. He's 10% rostered in Sleeper. So I think you'll have a better shot of him being available and snagging him. But both of those guys absolutely love this week on waivers.
Yeah. If you've been listening to us, you already have Rondell Moore because Nick's not here with us today. He's on assignment, but he
hears this from the airplane. Like he knows we're talking about him and he's just sitting in his seat on the airplane screaming about Rondell Moore right now.
All offseason, he just kept talking about Rondell Moore. And then we saw a little glimpse of it in the preseason. And for me, I was like, okay, Nick likes him. And we've seen usage in a role that the Cardinals don't have anyone to do, which is they don't run the ball. So they need a jitterbug. I don't want to pigeonhole them. No, they need someone who can take short passes and pick up tough yards and make guys miss. And while Rondell Moore did have a really long touchdown, it was, I'm not demeaning it, but it was a broken down play where it took a lot of time for it to develop. And then he caught the ball and made some people miss, score the touchdown. Awesome. But like what you said, after that, he got so many targets closer to the line of scrimmage and just made NFL defenders look silly. That's reproducible week to week. I can start this person confidently type of production. And we sort of already saw it coming. And through 2 weeks, it's been absolutely proven. I know Christian Kirk's having a good open to the season, and hopefully he's figured it out. But we've been waiting for Christian Kirk for a while. I think Rondell Moore is the wide receiver 2, obviously behind Hopkins, who didn't have like the biggest game, but who cares because he keeps catching touchdowns like he's Rob Gronkowski. So yeah, Moore he's worth it. If he is out there, I mean, he's like a 50-60% of your fab play because he should start for you all season as your wide receiver 3 or flex.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. If you're making a decision between Kirk and Rondell Moore is 100% the play. And I think the fab call is right because you're buying a piece of this offense that looks like it's going to average 30 plus points a game as long as Kyler keeps playing at this level, and you want a vital part of that, and you're going to get a vital part of that.
But yeah, you mentioned it. Murray is like, even if they don't miss the field goal and the Vikings win, Murray has to be the odds-on favorite for MVP, right? Like he's not only like making a lot of big plays, but it looks so good. Like
we are living in this golden age of quarterbacks that are just like not only fun to watch, but you watch them and you don't understand how they're doing the things that they're doing. Like we talked about it at the top of the show about Lamar Jackson, and obviously Patrick Mahomes is the king of this in terms of what he throws, but Kyler Murray is that like combo of the two. Like he makes some absurd throws and then also is just so fast and so slippery behind the line of scrimmage that you'll have people like ends coming down on him and he somehow just spins out of it and then makes a ridiculous play happen. And maybe we need to add an apology segment to this show, because I apologize to Kyler Murray for ranking him not as like the QB1 this year. That is on me.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I mean, unless Tom Brady throws his 60 touchdowns, he'll win it one more time. But
unless Tom Brady somehow throws 70 touchdowns, 50 of which to Rob Gronkowski, and they're all in their late 80s, because somehow that's just how it's going to work out.
And speaking of dynasty, quarterbacks have longevity.
Yeah.
So I got so lucky that everyone rejected all of my Tom Brady trades this offseason, because now I look smart.
Oh my God. In the dynasty league that I'm in, one of the people has been trying to like trade Derrick Henry for the last like 5 months. And after last night's game, it was just like, so I think we all underappreciate Derrick Henry too much. And it's like, yes, but it's also that thing is like, when Derrick Henry hits his cliff, if he ever does, it's going to just, it's gone. It's over. But maybe he's Tom Brady, and Derrick Henry will hit that cliff when he turns 50, which who knows? Modern medicine is a miracle. All right. That's all we got for you this week. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. It helps us so much. So please just take the time to go give us 5 stars. That really makes a difference. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. You can follow myself on Twitter at Pete M. Rogers, and follow Clark at NFL Clark. And of course, make sure you check out all the amazing content we're putting out over on the site at nerdballff.com. Until next week, my fellow nerds.